Welcome everyone to everything you need to know about product marketing interviews. My name is Kenton Kavescu. I'm your host, and I'm also the founder of Rocket Blocks, an online platform that helps candidates prepare for interviews, of course, including product marketing. And today our guest is Holly Watson. She is a senior product marketing manager at Amazon, focused on the AWS business unit. And I'm going to let Holly say a few sentences about her own background before we jump in.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you for having me. Really looking forward to the conversation. I know product marketing interviews can be challenging and tough, so hopefully we can break down a few of some good best practice tips. I've been in the product marketing business for a little over 10 years now and have seen it really evolve over that time from being this nascent department of who do you do? What do you do? Are you making decks look great? To really having it become more of a full function of strategic thinking and partnerships across the organization. So looking forward to hopefully sharing some best practices and tips and things to tune into as you're not only looking for that next gig, but going through the interview process.
Awesome. Well, I think that folks are going to benefit from all of the extensive experience you have in product marketing. And with that, let's just jump into it and start talking about product marketing interviews. And the first question I want to lead off with that we've been asking in this series for everyone we've spoken with is, what are your favorite interview questions to ask in product marketing interviews? And pick one or two of them and tell us what it is and also why that particular question you find like insightful and helpful as you're evaluating candidates.
Sure. Well, there's a lot of the behavioral situational questions that you're going to get thrown. So I would definitely recommend looking those up and being prepared for them. But specifically to product marketing, some questions that I like to ask is, actually, how do you as the candidate define product marketing? And I find this question to be very compelling because, as we know, product marketing can actually be interpreted very differently from person to person and organization to organization. So me asking that question actually allows me to gain some insight of that individual's background, how they've done product marketing in the past, and even maybe how they might be looking to change what they're currently doing and how an organization might give them different opportunities. So that's one question that I really love asking.
Awesome.
Another one that I like to ask is actually, what are the top 3 skill sets they think is the most important as a product marketer? This is a question that oftentimes you're going to see the personality of this individual come out, how much background they already have in the product marketing role, situations that they've had to encounter that might include things like that critical thinking, communication background, as well as the marketing, writing skill sets that come with the product marketing role. And again, it just really shows that person's background and ability to think through what are the most valuable things that I can bring to the table. Of course, expect some follow-up because my next questions are going to be about, tell me an example when you showcase some of those skill sets. And then I think one of the last ones, and this kind of gets more into the situational questions, is describing a time that you maybe disagreed with a stakeholder. We work with so many people across the board, so it's super important to understand how that individual has dealt with conflict in the path to resolution that they've taken.
Got it. And tell me a little bit about that second question you asked. What are the 3 most important skill sets for product marketing? I think that's an interesting question. Is there a right-ish answer in your head? Like if someone says 3 skill sets that are totally different than the ones you would have picked, is that an alarm bell in a bad way, or is there a bunch of different ways to skin a cat in this type of scenario for you?
Yeah, I do think that there's a lot of different ways to skin a cat, especially for this question, but I am going to be looking for something that fits in the realm of product marketing. I want there to be critical thinking, communication, organization, stakeholder management that is coming up in their answer. If they're going really broad about digital marketing efforts, events, PR, that's kind of telling me that they have the marketing background, but maybe aren't so versed in a product marketing relationship that really needs to be able to understand the scope and scale of many different relationships across the organization versus being that expert marketer. That's like the give and take or the fine line that you have to be able to walk as a product marketer.
Got it. Okay, great. And I think that actually is sort of where you started going with that response. And there are certain skills that might be important, but would illuminate that maybe this person understands aspects of traditional marketing, or in some cases PR, but not quite exactly what the product marketing role is and how that differs. So that's like one sort of mistake someone can make to that specific question. Tell me about in general, product marketing candidates are coming to these interviews, and you probably, I imagine, done like 50 or hundreds of these interviews over your career. What are the most common mistakes that pop up? Like a candidate, if they're looking to make sure they don't sort of fall into any of those pitfalls, should avoid?
Well, within any interview, I think the interviewee is really excited and wanting to tell the full story, the breadth and depth of a particular situation. And as a product marketer, we recognize that you are, again, working with so many different stakeholders across the business. Sometimes those business units or teams are just called different in your organization. So you might spend too much time just explaining the background versus getting to the meat of the matter. And so I revert back to possibly what we've all been kind of trained and taught through our schooling is to go back to that STAR method.
Yeah.
Really think about what is the situation, what's the task, what's the actions that you took, and then what are the results that you drove. And get comfortable using those pronouns like me, I, my versus the we and team. It can feel a little bit weird in that interview situation, but it's really important to have your stories down, be very poignant, and be comfortable using those me, my, I pronouns.
Got it. And I suspect I know why you're talking about those pronouns specifically, but elaborate, like what is the risk of if you lean towards using we a lot from the standpoint of the interviewer, what's the risk that you're running and what perspective might that leave with a person on the other side of the table?
Yeah, good follow-up. It's super important as an interviewee to convey what you did. What contributions did you make to the various projects? What initiatives did you drive? Opportunities that you found? Because as an interviewer, I need to understand specifically what value you brought to the team so that I can evaluate you on the proper scale. If you're using more general terms of talking about the team, you're conveying good collaboration with teammates, but it's really vague on what you actually did versus what the collective team accomplished.
Got it. Yeah, it's too squishy and understand like whether this person possesses the right skills.
Exactly.
Cool. And the first thing you mentioned you talked about sort of the way to escape falling into the trap is use STAR, situation, task, action, result, get super sort of structured about how you approach your story because that helps a lot. And it was the main thing that you see people running into is they just get way caught up in like context or explaining the background and then either forget to or just like totally short shrift the actual action they took.
Yes, explaining the relationship with product or the relationship with sales or the situation can get really not necessarily confusing, but just cloud the purpose of whatever question you're being asked. You might even honestly just forget the question amongst your explanation and then wonder, wait a minute, what point am I trying to? Yeah, which is, I mean, it's normal. It happens to all of us. So really thinking through how do I structure my answer is something that I think keeps you on task. Honestly, too, it helps you get through a handful more questions. As an interviewer, I'm prepared with several questions, the ability to kind of jump through different ones based off of the responses. But if I'm only able to get through 2 or 3 questions, how much did I really get to know about you? You got to be mindful of that time.
Yeah, fair enough. So don't ramble on, like get that context out and get to the action and the results. Okay, tell me a little bit, and you've alluded to this earlier, so it may be reiterating a little bit, but let's zoom in and focus on it. When you're sitting down and running through not only just a particular product marketing interview, you sitting down as the interviewer across the table, but when you're sort of organizing a round of interviews for a candidate, like they're going to meet 3 or 4 or 5, however many people it is that you put them through. What are those key skills you want to suss out, and how do you think about sort of getting a read on those throughout that sort of panel of interviews?
Sure. Yeah, this kind of goes back to that interview question that I like to ask, but in a similar tone, it allows us to develop these relationships of how do you think about product marketing? And for me, some of the top skill sets that I look for is that critical thinking. This one's a little hard to extract out via 30-minute interview. So you're going to have to see that over the course of the interview process. The critical thinking is going to probably come out through a lot of the situational questions. How did you deal with conflict? How did you deal with a launch that was truncated and you had to pull it forward? How did you deal with an ambiguous task? Things like that. You really have to be able to drill into that candidate's ability to think independently but also problem solve through a handful of different scenarios. Another skill set that I look for is communication. As we've mentioned, the product marketing's role is highly cross-collaborative. Oftentimes, I'm more or less working with a stakeholder more often than I'm working with my own product marketing team. Being a good communicator is going to be crucial in creating those relationships, facilitating meetings, as well as keeping your own team informed about different roadblocks and progress that you're having. Another task or another skill set that I'm looking for is your ability to think kind of holistically or end to end as you're working through things like customer journey and the sales process, right? So the sales process is going to involve your ability to think through ways to engage that seller or that field individual and make sure that you can relate to why does that sales process matter, so that I can tell the compelling story in order to develop more adoption for the product that I'm representing. So that situational experience, awareness of customer journey, sales process, go to market, those are things that I want to be sussing out throughout the interview process as well.
Got it. So critical thinking, communication, and understanding the different components of end-to-end user journey from the product to actually being adopted or sold in the field. Let's say you're you're an aspiring product marketing manager. You're trying to break into this field for the first time. Maybe you've worked in an environment where you've had some exposure to product marketing, or even just however you sort of learned about it. You're interested. You probably, let's say you have some of the relevant skills, but you've never gone through these interview processes. You've never actually held this title. What tips do you have for someone trying to break into this role for the first time? How can they initiate themselves in a pretty crowded field?
Sure. There's a lot of different paths to product marketing. It's not this super direct linear path that anybody takes. So I would say if you haven't had the ability to really hold the yardstick and say, I have product marketing on my resume, do your research. There's a lot of different forums available, Sharebird being one of them, that allow you to kind of explore what does this role look like. Also, use the job description. A lot of the times, the job description is going to be highlighting the skills that we're looking for. Using the same language that's in the job description really actually brings a lot of light and one-to-one comparison if we're looking at applicants. So if you've never been in the field, do your research, find applicable skill sets, and tell those compelling stories. Again, product marketing has a lot to do with writing, marketing, yes, but also telling compelling stories. So if you can drive some similarities between your background and, again, that job description, entry-level product marketing roles are actually pretty attainable.
Cool. Okay. So that's good news for everyone that doesn't have product marketing on their resume today, but really wants to sort of break in the role. Do your research. Really scrutinize the job description. It sounds, maybe try and see exactly what this role is about, what tasks are in there, responsibilities, and then use resources like Sharebird, of course.
Of course. The only other thing I might add to that is a lot of tech organizations, which is my background, you're going to be able to wear a lot of different hats. So while your first role might not have the product marketing title, don't dismiss it or not apply if you're able to still get within like a marketing function or even a product function, depending on the organization. So you might not get the product marketing role right away, but if you can get a little digital marketing, a little customer marketing, maybe even some sales outreach, those are the types of teams that a product marketer is working with. And you might find yourself being able to transition into a proper product marketing role a little bit easier. So again, a little broader than just saying, I need to have that title.
So if you like widen that aperture a little bit and get some relevant marketing experience, that might ease the transition into product.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. Okay, one last question for you. This has been great so far. Lots of good advice for aspiring candidates. Tell me about, once you get into this interview process, companies like Amazon, other big tech companies, for sure, the amount of candidates that are interested in these roles is pretty significant. It's a really competitive field. When you're going through the interview process, say you're doing the stuff you've talked about, like you're using STAR, you're telling your stories well in a structured manner, you've got communication and critical thinking, like all this stuff, right? You've got the right raw materials, but there's a lot of good candidates that also bring that to the table. What are your tips for going above and beyond in the interview process and trying to stand out so you can really land one of those offers?
Yeah, it can be a challenge. There's a competitive field out there by all means. I think the way to differentiate, using a product marketing term, is really do spend your time doing the research. It's part of the product marketing role in itself, right? Do your research, understand your competition, not the sense of like who else is interviewing, but who's the organization? What's their industry like? And kind of be able to be comfortable in ad hoc questions that relate to the business at hand. Being able to kind of subtly weave those into your responses makes the interviewer's ears perk up, saying, oh, wait a minute, they're using terminology that I've heard for our business, for the customers that we go after. So subtle things like that can actually set you apart quite a bit. The other thing I would say too, in terms of being able to differentiate yourself from the field, is be ready for your follow-up questions. I, as an interviewer, really enjoy leaving that purposeful time for the interviewee to ask me questions. And
Okay.
I hope that person is ready and eager for this portion. I know it can be intimidating, but prepare yourself with a couple of canned questions that show your interest. And this can be simply asking about what's the relationship with product management? How do you engage with sales? Describe some biggest opportunities or projects that you're excited about. Those showcase your interest in the role and your interest in the company. And those types of follow-up questions are really going to help me remember, who are you? How am I going to make sure that when I'm looking at all the candidates, I remember, oh man, you asked these really cool questions.
Got it. Okay. That's great. So it sounds like two sort of final tips. One is study sort of that field, that role, and if you can use some of the nuance and the language that maybe the people in that role are already speaking, it makes it seem like, hey, this person gets it. They talk shop like I do. And then the second thing is being really prepared with good questions, which I completely agree with. There's always nothing worse than getting to the end of the interview and saying, what questions do you have for me? And a candidate's, I got everything. And you're really like, this might be like a major part of your life, 50% of all your waking hours for the next 2 years, right? How could there be no questions? So I completely agree with that. I think it's just a bad way to end.
Well, you've got an insider on the call. So leverage that time with the company that you're interested in and ask the questions. And a product marketer too, you got to be comfortable asking those questions. You're going to be working with highly technical individuals. My background is so tech, but I couldn't stand up against an engineer or a solution architect. So I've got to be comfortable asking the questions. I would say as a product marketing candidate at the end of the interview, help me see that you're comfortable asking those questions.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think this is like a great natural ending point to the conversation. So remember to ask those questions. It's a key part. And thank you so much for joining us, Holly. This has been a great conversation. And there's a ton of awesome product marketing interview tips and advice for everyone that's going to listen in.
Awesome. Well, Kenton, this has been super fun. And I wish everyone out there going through the interview prep process best of luck.
Thank you. This podcast is produced by ShareBird, the peer mentoring platform for product marketers. It is the place to discover on-demand resources to help you with your product marketing. To view past episodes, go to sharebird.com. And if you're preparing for product marketing interviews, check out Rocketblock's product marketing interview prep tools, the best place to practice PMM interview skills and get live coaching to ace your PMM interviews. Visit us at rocketblocks.me.